welcome all, and thank you so very much for attending tonight's event, Finding Faith in the Pandemic and Beyond. My name is Mike Serazio. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Communication. And before I offer some introductory remarks, I just want to first offer some gratitude to the Church in the 21st Century Center and to the leadership team there for organizing this event. I want to also thank our co-sponsors, the Boston College Athletics Department and Campus Ministry. And thanks, of course, to our four panelists, who I will introduce shortly. So here we are, fast approaching the anniversary of March 11th, 2020, the date that Boston College announced that it was evacuating campus and going remote in response to a coronavirus pandemic that was already circling the world by that time, really altering history forever. The months and then years that ensued could be, by turns, chaotic, frightening, surreal, but it summoned from us practices of faith and hope and resilience that I suspect many folks did not know they would be capable of before this plague entered our lives. Now, it is, of course, not behind us. At present, about 1,000 people every day around the world continue to perish due to COVID-19, adding to 7 million who have lost their lives. And so I think if we could just begin with a brief moment of prayerful silence for those who've passed in the pandemic, some among your loved ones indeed, who may have gone home to God. So please join me in just a few quick moments of reflection on those losses. We memorialize challenges and tragedies as a way of creating meaning in our lives. It writes the narrative of faith for us, both personal and collective. And yet, I've been struck by how we as a culture, as a society, have gone back to pre-COVID normal in so many ways, without reflecting on how spirituality might have buoyed us in the face of all that calamity and mental health anguish. This past weekend, the New York Times had a cover story capturing the oral histories of the pandemic, and I'll just quote the lead here of the story, because I think it's a useful point of departure. This is about looking back with intelligence and care while acknowledging that the pandemic is still with us. This raises the possibility that when we say the pandemic is over, we're actually seeking permission to act like it never happened, to let ourselves off the hook from having to make sense of it. And with many claiming that they are, quote unquote, over the pandemic, that they have re-straightened the picture frames and dragged their psychic trash to the curb, this event in some ways is saying, hey, hold up. What's in that bag? How did faith get us through this? What practices of resilience did we discover along the way? So to talk through those tales of faith and resilience, discovering God and discovering faith through the trials of the past few years, we have an all-star panel assembled here. From your left to right, we have Belle Liang, a professor of counseling, developmental and educational psychology in the Lynch School of Education and Human Development. We have Lubens Benjamin, president of the undergraduate government at Boston College and a senior member of CSOM's class of 2023. We have Mary Troxell, an associate professor of the practice of philosophy in the Morrissey College of Arts and Sciences. And we have Reggie Terry, senior associate athletics director at Boston College. Please join me in welcoming them with a round of applause. So I wanted to begin by starting at kind of the departure point for us, going back to March 2020. And I guess I wanted to start by asking the question, at what moment did you have the feeling that the world was about to change forever, right? Are there any memories that linger from that initial kind of realization of the crisis, and in that early phase, in the lockdowns and sort of emergency kind of phase, were there any practices of faith, of hope, of wisdom that you held on to in those early moments? So whoever wants to kind of start out, feel free to jump in.
I'm happy to jump in. I think that stage was probably the least sort of processed stage for me. It is, it's just a time of it being very surreal. I was anxious and scared and concerned like everybody else. And at the same time, I know we're going to dig really deep into this. Having a whole history of going through some difficult things in life, just because the stage of life that I'm in, I could look back on other really low points or struggles or times of suffering and see the faithfulness of what my high power has been in my own life, seeing God's faithfulness. Does it mean everything went exactly as I wanted or hoped, but just recognizing that there was some order in the middle of what might otherwise be very chaotic and scary time. So, I think I, without recognizing, drew comfort from the track record of God's faithfulness in my life.
I think for me and for a lot of students, it got really real on March 11th, getting that email in class, in the dining hall, wherever you were that day. I think it's one of those moments where everyone knows where they were when the email was sent out, and the panic that ensued. I was in my Christian class my freshman year, just starting to get a hold of my BC experience when we got the email and I see my senior TAs crying. I couldn't really understand why they were crying or why everyone was so upset. But then those following months ensued of lockdown, and I found myself in a lot of moments of isolation. And I think in those moments, one of the only people I felt like I could turn to was God, and just really having that conversation with him.
Yeah.
I know where I was because I think I was here giving an agape latte talk. I think it was that night or the night. All I know is I got out of giving an agape latte talk and everybody was crying, not because of my talk. So, I remember very clearly the image I have of when I realized it was world historic was when there's tons of stuff in the news about people hoarding toilet paper, and I'd probably be voted most likely to hoard toilet paper if such a superlative existed, because I'm a planner and I'm anxious, and the way I control my anxiety is by planning. So I was ready to, every nook and cranny of my house, I was going to put toilet paper and sanitary wipes and things. And I prayed. I remember praying, and I thought of this night when Mike gave the prompt, to God, who do you want me to be? And the message was clearly, God does not want me to be the person who hoards the toilet paper. That was sort of the message. And the message was, instead of focusing on how to keep myself secure and make sure I have what I need, to try to use my energies to make enough space that I could be other directed. And I thought about, I always have themes in my spiritual life, and that was sort of my theme for a while. And a passage from the Bible that really helped me was in the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus says, don't look at the birds, they don't store and they're fine. Look at the flowers, they're beautiful, and they neither toil nor sow, etc. So why are you worrying? And that's a passage that always I had mixed feelings about. It was a beautiful passage that's comforting, but it also made me feel bad that I'm an anxious person, because I do worry about tomorrow all the time. And sort of the epiphany I had, and I don't know, I'm glad, I don't think there are any biblical scholars, and I think I'm glad about that, because I don't know how orthodox this reading is the idea is, don't focus on that stuff, on keeping yourself safe and secure, because it takes up all the space that you could be spending being compassionate and thinking of others. So that was sort of my guiding wisdom through it, is that when I got anxious, I was okay with my anxiety, but I tried to help. I tried to use it to think about what others might be feeling, how I could be there for others, and in particular my students. It became, my own anxiety became a touching space to help students navigate what they were going through, which was so much worse than what I was going through during that year.
Thank you. I think for me, as I think back, we got a little bit of a heads up before the email went out. I think I knew about an hour prior, and I was in the library, and the thought was, man, this is serious, and the chaos or the concern of how things would move forward, and the kids had to move out, and are we coming back, and I work over in athletics, and the mods erupted. It was like the week prior to graduation, they were getting it in early. They didn't know if they would have come back to school. So you had all these emotions going on, and I think personally, for me, I didn't know what tomorrow would hold, but selfishly, I believe that I know who holds tomorrow, even though I didn't know what tomorrow held. So, just like everybody else, I watched a lot of news. I watched Fox. I watched CNN. I watched the president's briefing every day, to try to get some clarity. I did everything that they said to do, masks, gloves, and I traveled during the pandemic a lot, which I'll talk about, which was, I missed those days, 5 people on a flight. Now, it's all packed. But I think at some point I chose to put my faith over my fear. That if I believe what I say I believe, and I believe God orders my steps, if it's I passed from COVID or I lived at 96 years old, I want to do what He's called me to do in that process. So, but it was tough, as you work with students and the uncertainty, but that's what I held on to, that I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know who holds tomorrow.
Beautifully put. Moving sort of forward and thinking about kind of the stage that we found ourselves in when we returned to campus in the fall, and we had the kind of surreal reality of trying to get through endless Zoom screens and masking and social distancing guidelines. I wonder, in what ways did you feel like you tried to find habits or practices that gave you the strength to persist through what I think could be very exhausting, very kind of taxing aspects, right? Where did you see, as we had this period sort of when we returned, but we couldn't quite be completely together safely as humans, in what ways did you see God working, or in what ways did you find strength to try to be human in a very kind of weirdly human time?
You want me to send it back, or you want to start? I'll send it back since you were first.
You want to send it back?
I'll send it
Okay.
back. I'll send it back.
Great, sure.
Well, I have to make a confession, okay? Like, I was on campus, but I got permission to be on campus. Now, I'll tell the story. Now, my family's in Arizona, okay? And my son was, at the time, he was in school. We sent him home, but I had a hard time wrapping my brain around going to Phoenix for who knows when. So what I did, I was here every day. I had I'm schedule. I get up, I worked out. Nobody was here. Another guy in the office. And what happened for us in athletics? We started to plan in regards to what it would look like in coming back. Not knowing. And really, it was like what we did from an athletic perspective. Kind of beta tested some things prior to the university kind of reopened. So, meeting with our doctors and protocol and going through, okay, you know, you can only be in a group of this size, you know, based on the state and the national guidelines. And we spent a lot of time in conversation, a lot of time, you know, with medical professionals, you know, via Zoom, and setting up protocol, you know, and working with housing and just concepts and conceptually what it would look like. You know, I was busy, but I was busy here, and a lot of that really for me was I couldn't fathom. And I love my family, and I went home for a period of time and came back. I mean, I must have transitioned back and forth maybe about 4 or 5 times, and the flights were so cheap. It was like $200 round trip from here to Phoenix, you know. So, and I wasn't scared. I mean, I followed all the protocols, but just for me, I just couldn't. I struggled with the fact of being out of my normalcy and routine. But through it all, and all of the work and the preceding meetings with university officials, ACC officials, planning and trying to figure out what would be safe as we tried to figure out how, you know, life would move on, you know, and project it. If you recall, some of the conferences came out, the Big Ten said, oh, we're not going to play, and the Pac-12 said we're not going to play, but the SEC and the ACC said they didn't say anything. So as it played itself out, you know, we planned and played 11 games and you know, and life started to come back, and I thought that was really beneficial for the students, for the institutions, for society, you know, in regards to kind of figuring out how to move forward.
Answer this so many ways. One thing is, as a Catholic, the one good thing about being a Catholic, there's a lot of good things, but one of the good things is it's a 2,000-year-old institution. It's not going anywhere. Like anywhere you go in the world, you can find a mass. No matter what, one of my thoughts is no matter what happens, I always have mass. And if you remember, all the masses shut down. And that was terrifying. That was one of the scariest things for me. Is thinking about not having the mass. And one of the things is friends and I think a lot of people did this, is we Zoomed together when we did our masses. So at least I had a community of friends. And I think that was the main thing I did during that time to sort of preserve whatever, you know, my peace of mind, was trying to find community where I could. And one of the deepest forms of community was actually with my students, because I taught in person that whole year. You know, I had these 25 students, most of whom mine was the only class that they were meeting in person, and they were extremely isolated, as some of you might remember. And we'd begin the class with sort of a check-in, and students were more authentic than they've ever been in those check-ins. Normally, when you ask a BC student, how you doing, they say, I'm killing it. And when you'd ask them how they're doing, they would say, I'm not okay, and here's why. And that kind of vulnerability, everybody was sort of forced into a kind of vulnerability that allowed the students to connect to each other and me to connect with my students in a way that is not typical. And I still feel the residue of that. I feel like students in my classes today are more open than they were pre-COVID. I think it's one of the graces that came out of a very terrible thing. So being very deliberate about finding ways to connect with people and share with people where you can find it, that to me was what held me together.
I think if you ask a lot of seniors what their least favorite year at BC was, 85% will say their sophomore year. Where all the rules and regulations, so many people per room, per guest, and some people only have one other roommate, and everyone lives on up. You're split everywhere. But selfishly, I really do love my sophomore year. I think in a time where so many things were unordered in my life, whether that be my academic life, my social life, being able to live with 7 of my closest friends was something that really brought an order to my life. And I actually started going back to church because I didn't know where else to turn. I knew my faith was a bit shaken after the pandemic, or during the pandemic. So I was looking for some sort of order to my life. I really found that in Mass, and I started offering an 11 p.m. Mass, which is like perfect for me because Sundays are my worst day of the week. And to go to Mass and I hear a homily from Father Tony or Father Jack, it really brought me and a lot of people I know a lot of comfort, seeing the same people every week, having some sort of consistency in your life, because you never knew when a class was going to be on Zoom or it was going to be a hybrid. I even felt the need to underload that semester as well and really focus on my spiritual life to really give me some sort of ground to build the rest of my foundation with. So I'm really grateful for that in Mass that I had sophomore year.
Really appreciate what my colleagues here are speaking about. I have to confess that I just got back from a trip to Guatemala this week, and I purposely wrote to Mike and said, I'm not going to prepare my response. I'm just going to be where I am. And it felt important to me just to be real. So much of the time, I think, as faculty, as staff, as students, or in leadership roles, you feel like you have to kind of have a polished response, the most helpful response. And, it was just a real choice for me tonight to just show up raw and really try to access my own, what I feel in my heart. And a lot of that is still not completely resolved and kind of in process. And so I guess one of the main themes that I would point to is that, it was a time of global disruption. That I think that, typically we as humans, we try to keep things fairly stable, and that disruption brings about a lot of negative emotion, fear, anxiety, all those things. And this was one of those times that we couldn't avoid disruption. Everything that we knew and that we expected was, thrown up and for grabs. And now the benefit, obviously there's all the horrible things that you mentioned before about the disruption and the loss of life and the loss in general of many different experiences. But what I'm coming to see is the power of being in a liminal space where you aren't where you were anymore, where you came from, and you haven't quite arrived to the next place. And you're in this kind of uncomfortable place that I'm starting to realize for myself is where I need to be more, versus trying to always have everything all wrapped up, knowing exactly what's happening, how to explain it, how to be helpful, how to contribute, how to add value. I think that this liminal space has enabled us to look at our lives from 50,000 feet up and question everything we were doing. That a lot of it wasn't that helpful before, but we were just doing it because that's what you do. This is what you expect to do when you come to a university, be with your friends, have these particular set of experiences. Now all of a sudden, you can't do some of those things, and you're looking at all of it from 50,000 feet up. And for me, it made me realize that a lot of it was trash. It was there were things of value, of course, in my life that I still value now, but there were quite a few things that I'm so grateful to have the brakes put on so that I could reassess what is purposeful in my life. And what I've come to see is that what is purposeful are not the things that I was so focused on and that many of our people around us are focused on, which is performance, accomplishments, trying to fit in, be popular, all the things that we have on our list of achievements and strivings. What for me it boiled down to is love and connection and contribution to others. And I had a chance, and I think many of us did, to practice those things because so many of the other things were taken away. So suddenly life became about, caring for the people in my family, caring and loving my students, trying to show up for them, trying to hear, and really be, present and honest about some of the struggle, and being able to really be in the moment, be present, versus always mind on future and what I'm trying to achieve, what I'm trying to do, or worrying about the past and regretting things. It was like, time froze and this is the moment that matters. So many other practices have evolved from that, and I'm still very much in the process of learning, what I've learned during that season. So.
Indeed, and that's actually a useful segue into kind of a sort of next topic for us. My students are familiar with this cliche that I use in class, and I say it ad nauseum, but I like to say that if the pandemic didn't change you, you did it wrong. In other words, that part of, and I think this builds on what Belle said a second ago, part of what the pandemic was doing was trying to teach us something about the world and our place in it and our experiences and how and where we can find hope and resilience. So maybe sort of bouncing from Belle, and we'll go, maybe Lubens, you can start. In what ways do you feel like the pandemic did change you? In what ways do you feel as though you live your life and perhaps you live your faith life differently or more authentically in any kind of sense in the aftermath of it?
Yeah, for sure. I think one thing the pandemic really taught me was just the value of time, and you never know when your time will come or when something will be taken from you, and how to really show appreciation and gratitude in the moment, how to really stay present in the moment. I think this is also, me and Mary went on a immersion trip to El Salvador together, and this was reinforced there for me this past winter break. But a lot of times in life, you'll find yourself in a moment and you don't know when it's your time to go or when it's your time to stay. And I think too often it's, all right, I have this, and I'm a big Google Calendar guy, so I have class from 9 to 9:50. At 9:50, I got a boogie because I have to be somewhere at 10. And then at 10, I have class until 11:15. I got boogie because I got to be somewhere at 11:30. And I found myself, since coming back, really trying to stay in those moments that feel right, feel good, where I feel like if I'm in a thin space, if I feel like I'm receiving this grace, why am I so quick to rush out of these moments, and why aren't I trying to stay in them as long as possible? So that could be coming from class and having a really good conversation with someone, and they're about to have lunch, and I know I may or may not have a meeting in 30 minutes, but in all honesty, is that meeting the most important thing in my life? Is that one of the most important things in life? Like you were saying, there are things that really matter in this world, like love and connection. And when you find yourself in those moments and in those spaces, since being back, I've been really trying to stay in them as fully and present as possible.
Yeah, it's such a hard question. Lots of ways. One way is, I think, Belle, you articulated it so well, this idea of realizing what matters and sort of realizing what doesn't matter. So it boils life down to the essentials. I also think something about the COVID, I think because our lives were so winnowed down, it allows you to pay attention in a way, and to pay attention to things that you didn't pay attention to, and that having that kind of attentiveness and realizing how important that is and how that fed me, I've tried to keep that in my life. So just the things like the beauty of my backyard, which I tend to ignore. I look out way more. I got very attached to the birds in my backyard over COVID, and it's a little weird, but that noticing what's going on in my backyard, just little things like that.
Well, for me, I would say what the pandemic did for me was just brought me back to God's sovereignty, okay? I believe He's sovereign and He's in control. And this pandemic played itself out and brought the world to a stop. All of our busyness, all of our agendas, all of our plans came to a screeching halt. And there wasn't much that we could do about it. And in all of our goings and comings, in a sense, God saying, where am I in your picture? how are you manifesting what you say you believe in, how you live daily? If you're a person of faith, and really, we had this medical pandemic, but we had a series of pandemics. You saw the racial pandemic as from the George Floyd situation, and then you saw an economic pandemic when everything stopped and commerce stopped, and then you just turn on the news and we had a political pandemic in regards to there was the discourse and dialogue was impossible, and it was very humbling for me. But what it was encouraging was am I willing? If my faith and belief, if I believe what I say I believe, how is that lived out daily in the midst of, oh man, people are passing away from something that you can't even see. We didn't have the technology. We didn't have any answers. All of the money, all of our resources, all of our stuff didn't help us. So where did we go? How do we wrestle with it? And I believe, the Lord has a way of getting our attention globally and personally. The peaks and valleys of life, I believe are to grow us and to mature us and to bring us along. And God willing, we make decisions and understand what was kind of going on. But if not, we get a chance to kind of do it again. It's like, we all have GPS systems, right? And how you plug in your address and you're going wherever you go. And it might be an accident or it might be something going on and you get rerouted. It tells you to recalculate, and I think in life, our decisions sometimes gets us to recalculate and to reconsider who we say we are. And if we're saying we're people of faith, it should be lived and practiced. And I think the pandemic called a lot of us to consider and to discern what I believe. First of all, do I understand what I say I believe? What does that really mean? And how do I live it out? So the circumstances of what we all experienced, I think, called us to question and to discern that. And for me, it was very humbling, but also very encouraging that I believe that God is who He says He is, in spite of what things look like. The hope and faith that He would be consistent in His character as He says He is would come forth. So.
Yeah, I would just say that kind of the other side of what you're saying, Reggie, and I agree so much with what you're saying. The part that's sort of the opposite of that I think I really connected with is the mystery of God. Like, I think that I grew up in a sort of a more conservative, traditional faith background where, it was like a lot about there's certain rules and expectations and you should follow them, and then you're going to not miss the blessing of God. And I think that from the time of the pandemic to now, which is like lots of other things have happened. Like I have, two sort of adult children, one who graduated from BC this spring and one who's graduating from high school next year. And, just kind of following along their journey of faith, as well as my students who, have faith, but have a very different relationship with it now, like in the sense that, and I'm learning so much from them that it is okay to let go of what we think we know and to embrace more of the mystery and know that there's many things we don't know about how God works. And so if we see something that is not according to what we expected, to not be we don't have to be gripped with fear. The other part that is become a realization is I saw this meme recently that is it's kind of a funny meme where this guy is saying that from the moment I say that I'm hungry, to 27 minutes later, you better look out because I'm going to be a totally different person. You don't want to know me when I'm hangry. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking that's so true. We have physical hunger, but there's so many other kinds of hunger that we have that we're often not aware of. And I love this scripture, the metaphor of Jesus is the bread of life, and it's speaking to like a deeper spiritual hunger that we have that we're not often aware of. But I think that for many of us, myself, like I'll speak for myself, that, the period of the pandemic to now has made me really aware of spiritual hunger and of longing and desires that I have, that I was just kind of like a good soldier, like just kind of pushing forward, doing the things that I need to do, my responsibilities, meeting people's expectations, doing what I have to, and now I'm getting more connected to what I want to. And I believe that a lot of the longings and desires have been put there by God, that they're not like bad things, that we have longings and that we have desires, and they don't sometimes fit with the expectations of people in our life, whether it's like our parents or our children or our peers, like expecting us to do these things. And so for me, it's been, both a personal practice as well as like a very big focus of my research is to help myself and support others in getting connected with the deeper longings, the authentic self. I think we have a really unique opportunity right now to connect to that because we've had a chance to pause from all the expectations and the whole, just the track that we've been on, the race that we've been in. So it's been that's something I feel very grateful for, even though it's a very messy process.
Indeed. One last question, and then we'll be happy to open it up for any folks who want to chime in. During the pandemic academic year of 2020-21, I did something very cheesy at the end of every class that I taught, because I'm very cheesy as a person. I would ask students to say, at the end of each class, I would say, against the virus, and I would ask students to chant in response, Team Human. For me, one of the powerful ways in which I saw God working during the pandemic was in the sense of community, the sense of human community against this terrible virus. And the question I'd like to throw to you guys is, in what ways did you find that any relationships that you had or any kind of sense of community was animated because of the difficulties of isolation, the difficulties of separation? In what ways did you perhaps find God working in the connections that you savored that much more, and the sense that it was truly a kind of a team human against this terrible pandemic challenge? Anybody want to jump in on that?
I can send it back to you because I have one thing specifically jumps into my mind is that, as I mentioned, I just got back from this service trip in Guatemala where I've been many times. Our families got involved with this NGO 10 years ago. And I had this really different experience this time, even though I've been there like many, many times. And I recognized that what I was doing in the other times is that I'm so focused on like the goals that I want to accomplish, and a lot of it is like I want to add value when I go there, and I'm thinking about that. And this time, I, similar to showing up, just how I am, I just showed up how I was, and I was sitting with my friend who is been working with this NGO for many years, and she's Guatemalan and so committed to her country and specifically serving in the communities surrounding the garbage dump, which are like the most impoverished of the impoverished. And instead of like just trying to contribute to whatever she was trying to do there, I just had this experience of like sitting and looking at her face and just thinking, she's so beautiful, like just radiant from the inside, and I am so here in this moment. I can't even think about like what I'm gonna say next or what I'm trying to do. And I think that for me really captures what has happened across my relationships. I think that, this is the little bit of the sad part, is that I have some regrets about how I was living before. Like even, my son is graduating now, I'm about to be an empty nester. I think that I missed some things because I was so focused on trying to do good things, like my whole life, which is, I have compassion for myself. I know I was, why I was doing that, and I think, that came out of a very well-meaning, but I think I missed some things. I missed an opportunity to truly contribute just by being my full human self and be present and enjoy this very moment versus look back on it and be like, that was a blessing that I got to do that. I did that and I did it pretty well. But instead, in this moment, fully embrace, like, I'm getting a chance to have this conversation with these amazing people. These people are sitting in the room, they showed up, they could have been so many, like, this is so cool. We have this opportunity to connect. So it's changed everything about the way that I connect.
I think for me, one of the things that became so clear was we couldn't travel. In a way, we could connect with people more easily because I mastered Zoom, which at my age I wouldn't have done. So my friends in California and my friends in Philadelphia and all over the place, we talked more regularly, and we had zero small talk because what we were going through was hard and we were talking about it. At the same time, I couldn't fly to see my parents. My parents are in Florida. I couldn't fly to see my friends in other places. I had family members who got sick and died, and there was no funeral because it was COVID. And so, again, that idea of it really it helped us all, I think, figure out what matters and what's important. And contact with people is really important. And I learned, I guess, not to take it for granted. So with my parents, I visit them, but I'm a very busy person, so I don't visit them as much as I probably should. And shortly after COVID, when you could get on a plane, I was like, I'm gonna go visit my parents. And my father got very sick, and after COVID, he got a very serious kind of cancer, and he has passed. But because of that, I think because of not being able to see my parents, I made a point of visiting. I flew every chance I got. And I'm the kind of person, if I don't ever cancel classes, and if I can't leave for at least 5 days, I don't get on a plane. Because what if I'm a planner? What if the plane is late? What if what if I miss the plane? What if there's a storm? And I just threw caution to the wind, and I get on a plane on Friday and I get home Sunday night. Because I knew no matter what, it mattered that I saw my father, that was my priority. So that idea that the thing that I think over and over with COVID is the most important thing is loving others and being connected to others. That's all that matters. Like that came home so deeply through COVID, and to have that reinforced in such an experiential way is a gift.
Well, just from a community perspective, what I did, I kind of recreated a community. Certain days I did certain things. I shopped on Friday afternoons and Saturday mornings. I cooked Saturday afternoon, prepped and cooked on Sunday. Sunday, I would get dressed like I was going to church, but everything was on Zoom. So I would drive through Boston, go to my favorite bakery was open. So I started going to and I still do it every Sunday. I get 2 cheese Danishes every Sunday, one for Sunday, one for Friday. So I had this routine, and on Thursday nights, like I normally do, I go to gyms. You guys know gyms right over here in Washington. Great place. Know those folks very well, and so I had a schedule, and I had people that we would talk. We would talk and have conversation, and kind of recreated a community, but with my family and siblings, I think with the Zoom, you talk on the phone and you text, but that just brought a different dynamic to be able to engage and to talk and to visit. But that interaction with one another was really important.
For me, right, when we got sent home, it was a tricky situation for me because, one, my parents had just moved to Florida, and I'd visited over winter break, and it didn't go the best I thought it would. So I was still trying to heal from that situation, and next I have 3 days to decide where I'm going to be for the rest of the summer, and I just didn't know where to go and where to turn. And so I went to school right near here. One of my friends, he lived in Brighton, so I asked him if I could stay for a couple of days, because I really thought we were going to come back, because I was supposed to have a job here on campus over the summer. But we never ended up coming back, so I had to spend the whole summer with one of my close friends in high school. His name's Jack O'Day, and it was strange because we weren't the closest of friends. We were close friends in high school. We had gone on Carroll together, but we weren't always keeping in touch my first year at BC. And so that first 2-3 weeks of me staying with him and his family was very, very awkward. not knowing what our dynamic was. We're friends, but now we just didn't know what to do. So one day we just decided to go for a drive. I remember this clear as day. I don't know where we were going. We were just driving on the pike for as long as we could, and we just chatted about what was going on, how we were feeling. And it was like one of the very first times we were open and honest and vulnerable with each other. And me and Jack, we had played soccer together, we had played baseball together all throughout high school. We had joked all around. We sat at the same lunch table, but I really never knew him for him and who he was and what his struggles were. And he didn't really know mine either. And that wouldn't have happened if I didn't have to go home or didn't have to get sent home. And that whole summer we just bonded so closely that now we consider each other brothers to this day, and we talk all the time. And I know I can tell him anything, he can tell me anything. And so friendships were really magnified during that timeline. I even think about my roommates that I have to this day that I'm really close with, and I consider them some of my closest friends in the world. Like, you live with a lot of people in college, and you're gonna spend a lot of time in your dorm room, but you have to spend extra time in your dorm room when you're not allowed to go outside. And so it was just a lot of fun just getting to know people and see kind of the spirit they have within them that you don't normally see on a day-to-day.
We have time for one or two questions or comments or thoughts from the folks in the audience here, if anybody wants to dive in.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I'm a very avid admirer of Professor Belle Liang's work, and I was in her class during COVID that's when I felt like if you don't know about her, she's very big into finding your purpose, your true north. And she recently came up with a book, go buy it. I think before COVID, my whole life was revolved around satisfying my parents, making sure I meet their expectations, or spiritually, I also come from a more conservative fundamentalist background, and I always wanted to make sure I'm pleasing my spiritual community by doing the right things, reading my scripture every day, journaling, and going to church on Sundays. But during COVID, that's when everything was put on pause. That's when I realized, it doesn't seem like it's that important to satisfy other people anymore when I myself, I'm so empty inside. And that's when the true north came in. And I felt like I was trying to fulfill other people's true north rather than my own. And this is a question for Professor Liang specifically, because I know her book just recently came out. Would you say, during COVID, that's when all the ideas started shooting out and just came up, and you just put them down on paper and made the wonderful work happen?
Oh my gosh, it seems like I planted Eddie over there. Eddie, it's so mutual. I have so much respect for Eddie too. He was in one of my classes during the beginning of COVID, and we were having class outside. Where were we meeting again?
Outside of the cafe.
Yes, and we had a great time. For some reason, the weather was always perfect on Tuesday at 4:30 until the very end. So we lasted most of the time outside. I really appreciate that question. The book, so we started writing the book before COVID, which is what's interesting to me, is that the things that we saw were struggles, mental health issues, a sense of lostness, disillusionment, were happening before COVID. But, COVID was just an opportunity for us to notice that. And so we were wow, it's been great for the book sales because it seems so relevant now, but we really were seeing the trends of that sense of lostness and disillusionment even before. We've been now on this book tour all over the country, some outside of the country, and we've been so struck by people, they're longing for a sense of direction and connection with purpose and belonging, a sense of belonging. Things that are just a part of the way that we're humanly wired. So why didn't we fully embrace making those the priority before? We were so busy, with our achievements and checking off boxes. So I think yes and no to your question. It's, a lot of the ways that my ideas have evolved around it have happened during COVID, but the ideas were relevant before.
Another question? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I think this is a really important conversation that we're having here. just to try to, process what for all of us is, a really major event in our young lives. And I think a question that I have is just if any of you have thoughts on, what's evident, here in just trying to have a conversation like this, a lot of people want to bury this in a box and forget about it and remember or move on as if all this never happened, that life could be normal the way we once lived it. And that's probably psychologically unhealthy to just completely forget and not try to think about how it changed us and how it formed our faith. Just wondering if any of you have thoughts on this trend of forget, try to, go back to the old normal.
I just got done teaching for my Pulse class, the Holocaust theologians, and there was that same impulse in Germany after the war. Everybody just wanted to, if you've ever watched movies, post-World War II movies, they're the most pathologically cheerful things you've ever seen. It'll make your teeth hurt. They're so sweet. And the reason why is because people just were like, that was terrible, let's forget it ever happened. And first of all, it's natural. Like, of course you don't want to dwell on it. It was terrible. At the same time, to turn yourself off to your own suffering is also turning yourself off to other people's suffering. And I am convinced that real joy and real life, the abundant life that our faith promises us, comes through entering into embracing in compassion people who are suffering, to be in solidarity with those who suffer. So, and again, the paradox is there's joy in that. So I would say I don't want anybody to beat themselves up because they don't want to dwell on it. I mean, my God, who wants to dwell on it? But again, I think opening your eyes to others, being other-directed, is a way to not bury it and at the same time find joy in the midst of a very difficult time.
I'd like to just to follow up. What it makes me think about is, some of you guys have probably seen it, those Jesus Gets Us commercials, the Super Bowl, Jesus Gets Us, and they tell a story, and then at the end, they're talking about how Jesus gets us. And he gets us because he was one of us. In the Christian faith, Christ came and was born of a special birth, lived a sinless life, died on the cross, rose again. Based on that message of the gospel, we have a great hope in tomorrow. And through that, I think it really calls that he gets us and he can get our attention, and he loves us as well. And through what we've all experienced, how does it grow and mature us? How does it change us for the better? How can I evolve in my faith and what I say I believe? A few weeks ago, the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church celebrated Ash Wednesday, and you put a cross on your forehead to show your alignment with Christ and your remorse from sin. And it was an outward display. But God wants to know the intent of our hearts. 1 Samuel 16 talks about how when David was called, he didn't look like the king, but he was the king. But it's not about what we look like to the outward folks, but what our intent is. So I would just encourage you as you live daily to understand what you believe and why you believe it. And very thankful for the church of the 21st century and everybody to put this together. But it calls to us, if you're a person of faith, is that in this chaotic world, in this mess of pandemics that we have, in the various ways that it's manifested itself, how can you be the light? In Matthew 5, it talks about you are the light of the world, and based on the light in us and how we live daily, that we can bring honor and glory back to God based on how we live. So be encouraged. Look for the encouragement and how you can use the adversities of life, the trials and tribulations of life to be more like His Son, to draw us and to grow us and to mature us into the people He's called us to be. So be encouraged, and the sun will shine tomorrow, and know that God's faithful in all things, in the things that we embrace and the things that we don't. He's faithful.
It's a beautiful and inspirational way to cap things off. The Jesuits have a kind of animating phrase in philosophy, finding God in all things. I think in the midst of the pandemic, there was a great deal of darkness and confusion and challenges, but even through that, we could feel God working and teaching us and guiding us toward discovering our true north and discovering what's meaningful in the world. So please join me in thanking our panel for their beautiful inspirational reflections tonight.